All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. That brings us to item 4, amendment and approval of today's meeting agenda. Are there any proposed amendments? Member Lynn?
Yes, under item 11, report of under officers, I move to change the order of presentation and place PMC CEO Phil Hofstadter last on the agenda item.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. I'm just curious what the reasoning is.
Oh, my only reasoning is that to give Phil a chance to talk about any points that were raised earlier in other discussions here. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of that amendment, clerk call the roll, please.
Dave,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff, Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea. Yes.
Okay, so the way we will do that then is we will, if this works with the assembly, we'll put PMC CEO Phil Hofstadter last, and we'll start with the Alaska State Municipal Sales Tax Director, Clinton Singletary, and then we will hear from Search Dr. Elliot Brill. So let me get back here. Public hearings.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I have one more amendment to the meeting agenda. Actually, I'd like to strike item 6 under new business, and I will include that as a motion under unfinished business of item A of the budget ordinance. And item 6 is my request to have $100 gift certificates for all the members of the EOC.
15G.
Oh, excuse me, 15G. Sorry. Thank you.
So do you have that, Debbie? Keep me up in the loop here. Member Mucci.
So just a question for Member Kenziger. So we're gonna remove that and put it in the budget?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
So what you'll do is, okay, the discussion. So what you intend to do then is just move that into the third reading of the regular.
Yes.
budget?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, yes, clerk call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Chelsea. Taylor,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes. Okay, that brings us to board, commission, and committee reports. No, that does not. Let me back up. Bid awards. I have 2 street sewer replacement projects.
We need to vote on the amended agenda.
Okay, entertain a motion to vote on the agenda as amended.
So move.
Second,
Discussion. Clerk call the roll on the amended agenda.
Dave,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea.
yes.
Okay, we'll move forward with today's agenda as amended. Item 5, public hearings. There are none today. Bid awards, the IRA 2 street sewer replacement project bid award will be considered under new business, item 15B. That brings us to item 7, persons to be heard related to today's agenda. Clerk Thompson, is there anyone in the queue for that?
Yes, we have several people in the queue, and we'll begin with Becky Knight.
And I would like to remind the people speaking today, it's a 5-minute limit, and the clerk will time it, and you'll hear her alarm go off at 5 minutes. And I'd appreciate it if you'd wrap up your testimony at that point.
Go ahead, Becky Knight.
My name is Becky Knight. The proposed native legislation, if enacted, will impact Petersburg and the Southeast region in a huge way. Following is my response to the lobbyists' answers to the borough's questions. Question 11 and 19 asked, why not leave the subservice rights to the United States? The question was not answered. I request the Petersburg Assembly to ask for federal retention of mineral rights with the rights put into a conservation easement. This would protect the corporations from surface damage due to mining by other corporations, as well as the habitat there. In other words, not copper pit on Mitkoff Island. Sea Alaska has enough mineral rights already, and the Q&A says it has not used them. Regarding access, question number 5. Access is only addressed by roadways, trails, and forest roads. Access is not addressed from the shoreline. In Southeast, most access for recreation, hunting, and fishing is via the shoreline and then into the upland on foot. Verbal assurances have no legal basis granting full access to the affected parcels. The term reasonable restrictions can be interpreted to prohibit access to these lands based on arbitrary criteria. Finally, what is to prevent any of these selections from being subdivided and sold for, say, a lodge, Botbite and Wood Point come to mind, and the new owners posting no trespassing signs? And what is to prevent future efforts to secure fishing rights in the waters surrounding these proposed selections? Conflicts with uplands private ownership are inevitable. Public lands already provide equal opportunity access to our precious public lands and should remain in public hands. Regarding subsistence rights, if enacted, Petersburg residents would lose their federally recognized subsistence rights on the selection parcels, since those lands would no longer be in federal ownership. Through the years, my family has harvested several deers from the heavily used area around Wood Point and Thomas Bay. I request that this parcel be eliminated. Similarly, the Mitkoff parcels are also fully utilized by locals, including my family. Access will be lost, whether through denial of passage or even loss of deer habitat through clear-cut logging under the lax State of Alaska Forest Resources and Practices Act. The Thomas Bay area is also heavily used by fishermen and crabbers. Regarding question number 6 and the Tongass Conservation Strategy and the value of old growth reserves, the strategy was intended to maintain viable, well-distributed populations of wildlife throughout the Tongass. The supporters' response is that the new corporations, quote, will not be subject to such restrictions, but that's exactly the point of the question, and it is not addressed. Their testimony before Congress last year and the Q&A both say the landless groups are left with the scraps. This is also true of the OGR system. Most of the OGRs don't meet the minimum biological requirements for an OGR because loss of habitat from both federal and non-federal logging. The best was logged and then the best of the rest. Attempting to move OGRs would put sensitive wildlife populations at risk, at higher risk. Ecosystem realities must be taken into account and not dismissed, especially so since the landless groups won't commit to not logging or even to not logging in particular locations such as OGRs. The Q&A response also overlooks the fact that logging habitat damage is cumulative, ongoing, and long-term through the Forest Service, Alaska Mental Health Trust, Division of Forestry, and the university, and that the OGR system is a quarter century old is immaterial. Regarding question number 7, it is clear that culvert and road maintenance is likely to not occur on roads where the Forest Service does not retain an easement. And finally, the landless groups assume an entitlement to one township based on the other corporations in Southeast. However, had the corporations been included in ANCSA, perhaps Congress would have allotted less than one township to each of the Southeast corporations, or perhaps it would have allotted land to Sea Alaska on a less than 1-to-1 ratio with each village and urban corporation. So if Congress wishes to accommodate these 5 groups in some way, in some way as corporations, maybe that remedy needs to be novel compared to the earlier ANCSA corporations. Allocation of land in Southeast was in 1971 and still is a zero-sum situation, particularly regarding habitat and its ability to support stability of the ecosystem, despite large losses of a key component, that is productive old growth forest. There are too many outstanding questions that have not been answered and potential conflicts. It's a Pandora's box. The bill should be stopped dead in its tracks. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony today, Mrs. Knight. Clerk Thompson, is there anyone else in the queue?
Yes, thank you. We have, sorry, where's my list? Eric Lee,
Okay, Mr. Lee, you have the floor.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're a little faint, but you're clear.
Star six. What? Star six. What's that?
What's that?
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
That's better.
That's
Yeah.
better, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, and my comments are addressing agenda item 15.
We seem to have lost you, Mr. Lee.
Operator error, I apologize. Okay,
Okay.
Mr. Lee, start again.
Yeah, okay, here we. My comments address agenda item 15I. Listening to the work session with the Natives Without Land representatives last week, I couldn't help but think how indicative it was of how inadequate this public process is and has been from the beginning. The work session was held with very short notice to the public, very little media coverage, and only 2 staff members present from all the staff of Murkowski, Sullivan, and Young's offices. No official in-person testimony was taken. Perhaps most importantly, no studies of the ecological, social, and economic impacts of this bill have been done, as they should have been from the start. So the vast majority of the public didn't have enough factual information to form and verbalize any opinions and questions they might have had. From the beginning, the public outreach from Murkowski's office has been extremely poor. To improve the public process, I think Murkowski's office should start by hiring some qualified researchers to do the broad research the public needs to participate in an informed manner. This bill is a big deal. If ever there was a bill that required full and complete public process, it is this one. S3231 would divide highly valued and used public lands along racial and ethnic lines, which, as we have seen elsewhere in the world, is inherently very prone to conflict. Now is the time that every effort be made to foresee and iron out all the potential conflicts with such a bill as this. I was in the queue to speak at the work session, but was unable to connect due to technical difficulties. The question I had in mind to ask regarded a clarification of the Natives Without Land response to question number 2. I'm sure the response seems clear enough to the Natives Without Land representatives who are very familiar with the revenue sharing arrangement under ANCSA, but the general public does not have the background to readily understand the response given. It is important that the public understand this issue of compensation already received by the Natives Without Land. So I was going to ask for an expanded explanation geared for the layperson to understand. So I'm asking that now. I think the best way to move this process forward is for the Assembly to gather more questions and send them to Murkowski's office with the request they be responded to in a timely manner by her staff and not the Natives Without Land. It would show some real involvement from her staff that is very lacking now. The solution to resolving the wrongs of the past has to come from the people, the hearts of the people, and all stakeholders need their voices heard on this issue. The importance of a bill such as this having the respect and goodwill of all the people just can't be overestimated. It's profound. So thanks for this opportunity to comment. That's all I have. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your testimony today, Mr. Lee. Are there any other people in the queue, Clerk Thompson, to speak?
There are, Mayor Jensen. Those were the only 2 people that, oh wait, I apologize. Nicole Hollingshead did sign up. I just did also want to remind other people that if they're on the line and have not contacted the clerk's office prior to the meeting to sign up, that is the process that we are trying to handle. If you're going to Zoom in and you want to speak, if you can please sign up ahead of the meeting. I know that there are a few people on the line, and if there are others that have not signed up but would like to speak under items related to the agenda, please do raise your hand and we will do our best to accommodate. But for now, Nicole Hollingstead, and I will unmute her.
Okay.
Hi,
Okay,
are you able
Nicole.
to hear me now?
Thank you.
Yes, you're clear.
Thank you so much. I will not likely take the full 5 minutes, but simply want to put before the assembly again today the many conversations that we've had on this issue, the absolute willingness of the Landless Coalition to listen to the concerns and questions and to answer them timely, and to return those answers to the communities that we talk with, to those stakeholders who are interested in what happens with the lands in our Tongass Forest, and that we have provided answers to over 54 questions that have been compiled through these sessions. You do have those answers, and we understand they'll be placed on your website for public consumption, which is excellent. It's where they should be. And in understanding how accommodating we've been, I think you're starting to get a sense of the kind of collaborative, open, conversational, good neighbors that we would be should we have this opportunity to establish an urban corporation in Petersburg. I think you're seeing flexibility, adaptability, and understanding of what is good and right for the residents of Petersburg, a willingness to continue these conversations, to look at these parcels, and to be flexible on parcels that have either federal or private holdings. The upshot of this is that we've proven ourselves to be very amenable and supportive of what the needs of the community are as we work this legislation through the process. Knowing all of that, understanding that, and seeing it in action, we therefore appeal to the Petersburg Borough to consider support of this legislation, knowing that it too can be amended as it works its way through the process. I've mentioned before on prior calls that this is a long time coming. You heard from the delegation team members themselves that this is a priority of our delegation. And with Sealaska backing the coalition, we will continue working on this legislation until it does pass. So we're very hopeful that the Petersburg community sees how hard we're willing to work with all parties to make this successful. And we ask ideally for a statement of support from the Petersburg Borough, but there are, of course, other stakeholders who have taken a position while not being able to offer full support, certainly do not have an objection or opposition. And there are those considerations for the Assembly to make as well. You've heard many of us speak very passionately, very learnedly, assuring public access, showing our willingness to be flexible on parcels, making it the letter of the law on easements. All of these conditions, I hope that you will take that into consideration today and act in support of this legislation. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for your testimony today. Clerk Thompson, are there other people in the queue?
There are not under items related.
Okay, that moves us to item 8, persons to be heard on items unrelated to today's agenda. Are there any people wanting to testify or speak?
Yes, we do have Jennifer Briner, and I will allow her to speak. There we go. Jennifer, you're on.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, Mayor Jensen and Assembly members. My name is Jennifer Briner, and I am representing myself. I would like to take this opportunity to make a few comments about the COVID response in Petersburg. I would like to commend Carl Hagerman and his incident command staff for doing an excellent job over the past year and several months. Excuse me. Carl was an outstanding choice as the EOC incident commander. He has been an excellent communicator, has put a lot of thought and research into each recommendation, has acted in a timely manner, but has also shown patience and restraint to not overreact or to react too quickly to changing situations. It's been an excellent experience to work with Carl and his team. and I feel the joint response to the COVID-19 health pandemic was an exceptional and made a positive impact to the health of our community. I would also like to acknowledge the incredible effort that Petersburg Medical Center has shown throughout the pandemic. The staff of PMC, led by Phil Hofstetter, have been working incredibly hard throughout this experience. The pandemic highlighted the need and the importance of the community healthcare. PMC took a leading position in the fight against COVID and collaborated with the borough, the schools, the United States Coast Guard, the canneries, public health, the state of Alaska, and many private businesses and organizations to help keep the community healthy. As an independent community-based organization, PMC was able to react to and respond to the needs of Petersburg in an efficient, effective, and timely, and most importantly, patient-centered manner. As a PMC employee involved with the COVID response, I've had the privilege to see innovation, collaboration, dedication, and commitment to the people of Petersburg firsthand from my coworkers and those who we collaborated with. In my career as a registered nurse, I have never worked longer, harder, and under so much pressure as I have during this pandemic. I've also never seen so many people rise up and take on extra responsibility and work so diligently toward a common goal. I feel proud of the work we have done together as a community, and I'm thankful to be part of our local community-based healthcare system. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony today, Mrs. Briner. Are there any other people in the queue to speak on items unrelated to today's agenda?
Or not?
Okay. That brings us to item 9, board, commission, and committee reports. There are none today. There is nothing listed under the consent agenda. So that brings us to report of other officers as amended. And we will start with Alaska Statewide Municipal Sales Tax Director Clinton Singletary. Director Singletary will go over changes to the Alaska Seller Sales Tax Uniform Code, updates, and answer any questions. So, Mr. Singletary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Assembly and Mayor. But you know, I'm having weird sound issues on my end.
Hang on, sir. We have a sound issue. Okay, can you try it again, Mr. Singletary?
Yes, you guys are all still very staticky as well.
For some reason, coming in very broken on your book. And we're going to try to fix that problem. We can move back to Mr. Singletary.
Okay.
Testing, testing.
Is this working? Okay, Mr. Singletary, are you still with us? Can you give it another try? Well, hopefully it'll work.
Yes, sir. It sounds much better.
Yes, it does. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So thank you for having me all today. My name is Clinton Singletary. I'm the Municipal Sales Tax Director with the Alaska Municipal League. We administer the Remote Sales Tax Commission on behalf of commission member jurisdictions. I'll be speaking primarily today on pages 41 and 42 of your packet, which is my kind of overview of the uniform code changes that were approved. But definitely if you have other questions outside of that, let me know and I'd be happy to answer them. So we met during December and January. A number of jurisdiction representatives got together and we worked through a list of proposed updates or needed changes that we had to the uniform code. And as that worked through, it worked its way up to the Commission Board of Directors, who approved all the proposed updates back in February. And so what I've got on these 2 pages are just kind of some of the more material changes. They're generally administrative in nature, but wanted to talk through some of the background on them. I won't hit every single one of these. Some of them are much more self-explanatory than others, but definitely stop me if you want one addressed. So the first change we did was section 040, paragraph A. So we updated the calculation for the economic nexus threshold to look at the current calendar year, not just the previous calendar year. And the main goal behind that was to really just expand the time frame that we could capture remote sellers. Depending on how their activity fell into the state, they may have only may have gotten a free year essentially before they had to register and start collecting tax. So that was the first item. We also updated, skipping down to the third item in the list, section 080, paragraph A and B. So there's this concept of marketplaces on the internet. A good example is Etsy and Amazon. And you have some sellers that only sell through a marketplace. And under the Uniform Code, marketplace facilitators, so this is Etsy and Amazon themselves, they're responsible for the tax collection on behalf of their third-party seller. So what this section does, this modification, is it removes the registration requirement for these marketplace sellers if their only sales are through the marketplace. Basically, there's no need for them to register if they're not responsible for collecting the tax. So that's a number of other states have done similar changes to their statutes. So we're kind of falling right in line with what other states are doing as well. The next one I'd like to talk about is section 080, paragraph H. So it's clarifying that if a remote seller registers with the commission, that they don't have a requirement to register with the any of the local jurisdictions that are members of the commission. So kind of the history behind this is typically jurisdictions only issue business licenses to sellers with a physical presence. Since remote sellers don't have a physical presence, there is no need for them to contact your city for an additional business license. Basically, their one registration with the commission covers all of our participating cities. So that's a common question we would get from sellers on that front. The next item I'll talk about is section 090, paragraph B. Has to do with the filing frequency change. The standard frequency that was picked back in the day was monthly for remote sellers. We allowed for less frequent quarterly filing, and we found the need to allow also for annual filers. The goal with the annual filing is, what we're targeting at least, is only allow that if, one, if your local jurisdiction allows it, and two, if all their sales are tax exempt. So this could be wholesalers that are shipping into the state, or maybe companies that specialize for government entities. So we'd be able to allow them to go annual filing. The section 110, paragraph A, we clarified rounding. The way the original code was drafted sellers were required to round their tax due, and that created a number of headaches for us administratively. So what we're clarifying now is simply round their reported sales, both gross and exempt sales, but then tax would be due, to the penny. So that's proven to be a much better change than what we had. I'll skip over to page 42 of the packet now. Section 170A was updating the late filing fee. So similar to a lot of our member jurisdictions, we charge a $25 late filing fee. And this fee was originally structured to never max out. Every month was an additional $25. And this has been modified to max out at 4 months, same as our late payment penalty of 5%. So creating a little more uniformity there in regards to our penalty charges. I will skip to section 180, the remote reseller certificate. So shortly after the commission got started, we found there was kind of a gap created. And historically, sellers have been able to get a resale certificate from jurisdictions if they had a physical presence in that jurisdiction. Well, now that we're dealing with remote sellers who don't have physical presence, there is no way for them to get exemption on resale purchases when being shipped into the state of Alaska. So this fills that gap by allowing only certain sellers, which are remote sellers without any physical presence in the state, that can apply to us to get a resale certificate for items that they're reselling into the state. So that seemed to have been a very quality addition there, much needed for now that we're branching out into the lower 48 companies more than we were. Section 240, the main thing in this was paragraph A. So we added basically that if any of the penalties in that section 240 differed from the same penalty charged by the local jurisdiction, this section would defer to the local jurisdiction penalty. So this covers a variety of typically, I don't really look at them as penalties, but kind of one-time fees for different violations. So a little different animal than the late filing fee or the late payment penalties. So one of the bigger changes or additions that we made to the code was section 260. We call it our savings clause. This provides the commission and really member jurisdictions some protection against discrimination claims that could be brought by remote sellers. Kind of generally the uniform code was developed to give uniform tax rules for remote sellers across all of our commission members, so that remote sellers had one set of rules to follow and it didn't change regardless of the jurisdiction they were dealing with. The uniform code, however, it really can't be uniform with every local sales tax code. A good example is penalties. Every city, municipality across the state charges slightly different penalties. So what this savings clause does is if a remote seller brought a claim against the commission to say, we're getting worse treatment by being charged a higher amount of penalties than what a local business is being charged, then this savings clause would kick in and would allow the local lower penalty rate to apply rather than our possibly higher penalty rate. Basically keeps things from going to court is the main goal there, and allow things to move on. And then, we would probably look at, well, do we need to modify the uniform code further to dial in the penalties or, whatever the topic was at that point. So this was something our legal team was very adamant that we needed to add to the uniform code. We also tweaked a few additions and added, or a few definitions and added a few definitions. One that I'll talk primarily about is the definition of service. So we modified the definition of services to better capture what a remote service was. And it's basically a service that is being delivered into a member jurisdiction. So this is going to more clearly capture these streaming services and other online type services that are done that previously member jurisdictions hadn't been able to capture revenue from. So this will help out our compliance along those lines a great deal. And bottom of page 42, generally we had we cleaned up some language around the use of the term jurisdiction. We now have either taxing jurisdiction or member jurisdiction to clarify, is it one that has a tax and is not a member versus a jurisdiction that has a tax and is a member of the commission. The last bullet as well, we proposed 4 different sections. We standardized it to a 3-year time frame. It's my understanding that Petersburg staff is recommending 2 of those sections stay with a 6-year time frame. I believe that's a section 100C and then section 200 regarding estimating tax and then retention of records. It's not ideal to have a different time frame used for all of these. Our goal is standardizing, but if Petersburg wants to keep the 6-year on those 2 clauses, we can work around that. So that's really the important stuff that I wanted to touch on. Open to any questions you all might have.
Are there any questions of Mr. Singletary from the Assembly? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Can you tell me what the difference is between a remote seller and a marketplace facilitator is?
Sure. So a remote seller is literally the person selling. So it's the person who owns the goods, if you will. A marketplace facilitator is looked at as they maintain a platform on which remote sellers can sell their product. So give an idea, look at Etsy as an example. It's a number of individuals selling their own products on a single platform. And so Etsy as the marketplace, they're best suited to be able to do the proper tax collection and handling of payment and remittance of the taxes, rather than have all the thousands of individual sellers that are on their marketplace.
You have another question, Member Mucci?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So under 4.3, it's on page 20. It's under section 4.30.050 under reporting and remittance requirements. It talks about sellers with a physical presence in the member's jurisdiction that also have a remote or internet-based sales. Would that be an example, be like fishing lodges, or what's an example of that?
A good example, I'm not familiar with the stores you have in Petersburg, but a good example would be Walmart that is located in Ketchikan. So because Walmart generally is a seller that has a physical presence, but it also conducts online sales into the member jurisdiction. So we would protect the revenues that Ketchikan's already getting from its online sales by Walmart. It would continue to stay with Ketchikan and be reported directly to Ketchikan rather than going through the commission.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Singletary from Assembly members? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your presentation today, and we'll see you later.
All right, thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the revised chain of events here, and Search Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President Dr. Elliot Brule will share Search's experiences partnering with communities. So there's a podium with a mic there, sir.
All right, let's see if this mic works without feedback. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members for inviting me to come and speak about our past experience in partnering with communities in Southeast. And we've had quite a bit of experience with that in recent years. Since Mayor Jensen mentioned that that the community of Petersburg is kind of standing at a point trying to understand how to go forward with with an older facility that is probably coming to the end of its useful life. And I think that's an experience that's been occurring in a number of different communities around Southeast. And I've spent a little bit of time looking at what appears to be a fairly robust process for the community, looking at what are the needs of the community going forward and the challenges faced with that facility. And the questions are fairly complex as the business of healthcare is becoming increasingly complex, but the basis of I guess what I'm here to tell you today is fairly straightforward in terms of what would be, how we would see the potential for a possible partnership, which would, you know, the components of which would look probably similar to what our partnerships with other communities have, you know, recently been with Wrangell and with Sitka, which is that Search acquires the practice and commits to employ all the existing employees and to operate the practice. The community provides a suitable space for a future facility, and Search constructs that facility and then operates it. And in this case, your existing physical plant includes both a critical access hospital, a clinic, and a skilled nursing facility or long-term care facility. And we would certainly envision including all of those things in a future campus. A lot of people don't, there's a lot of things people assume to know about Search and or do know or know partial aspects of what Search is and what Search does. So if you'll indulge me for a few minutes, I'd like to just tell you a few things about us and what we do and where we do it and how we do it. And then speak briefly about the new critical access hospital that we've just constructed in Wrangell. So on the second page of the packet that I gave you, which has the map, it shows, you know, the 27 different communities that we provide care in. We have 2 locations where we have critical access hospitals. One is in Sitka and the other is in Wrangell. We have large clinics and small clinics and some clinical spaces that are not permanently staffed, but where we provide itinerant care. Last year, we provided about 190,000 outpatient visits in these facilities. And over 7,000 visits with specialists. Most of that specialist care was provided in the communities of Sitka and Juneau. With the changing face of medicine last year, we provided like 23,000 virtual visits or telehealth visits. So that's an expanding area for all healthcare organizations. 7,000 inpatient bed days and approximately 13,000 surgeries. Much like Petersburg Medical Center, we've struggled in the last year to respond to the pandemic, and our staff has been working their collective tails off to meet those needs, and we've been partnering with our communities. And I think one of the things that people assume about Search is, oh, that's a native healthcare company. It's true that we are a tribal health organization, but we're a private company. And we provide care to every member of the community where we provide service. And we're committed to the overall health of Southeast Alaska. We're a Southeast Alaska company. So we're not a federal agency. We're not the public health service. We're not a for-profit entity. We're a private nonprofit company. Public Law 638, which is a federal law that was passed in 1975, said that Native entities can provide care that the federal government would otherwise provide. And that was basically the law that was the beginning of the existence of search, which started in 1976. So there was, in different Native communities around Southeast Alaska, actually it was the women of those communities that got together and formed a collaborative group and said, let's pool the money that's available to us. And we can create an opportunity to do more than any one community could do by itself. So that's the consortium part of it. So it's the Southeast Alaska Regional Consortium. So the consortium is that collective coming together. And so our board of directors, and on this third page, it speaks a little bit to the governance of the organization. Our board is not made up of Native corporations. It is made up of elected members from Native communities that are in those places that decided originally to put their resources together to form search. So there's 15 of those board members. And as a matter of fact, Petersburg Indian Association has a representative on our board. That's Annette Bennett. Some of you may know Annette. And she is a very articulate and fully participatory member of the board. And it's a pleasure to work with her. One of the things about the organization then, as we have grown, and I'm a family doctor. I started with Search back in the mid-90s. So I've had an association with them going back over 25 years. And one of the things that's changed is that we have begun to offer services in all of our communities to all community members. And what is the reason for that? Well, originally the amount of money that was put into the consortium by the feds was inadequate. It stayed inadequate. The flow of that money was changing from year to year and from month to month. It's extremely difficult to provide high quality healthcare. And because the law allowed us to expand services to all members of the community, that change was made in the early 2000s. And since that time, we've seen really the best that could possibly occur in terms of the concept of the rising tide raises all boats. We were able to provide services and care in small communities as well as our larger communities that we would never be able to provide if we did not take that approach to our business. The other thing that's great is that we're a local in the sense that we're a Southeast Alaska company. So we understand Southeast Alaska. We employ Southeast Alaskans, and the profits that we make in our work, we reinvest in our communities. We reinvest in our operations. See our values that are listed. I'll tell you, as our Chief Medical Officer, we strive to live up to our values. We are like any company of 1,300 or 1,400 people. There's challenges in doing that. However, as the Senior Vice President, I insist that we bring those values out onto the table when we're making our decisions. What we've seen in our partnerships with communities that we have formed new partnerships with is a very understandable concern about how do you incorporate local input? How do you incorporate local thoughts, ideas, concerns? And we've created local community board that allows us to continually share on a regular basis the information about the services that are received within that community. The quality of the care, the number of complaints, the kinds of care, the future services that we're contemplating, those types of concerns. And we have, by charter, included in our partnership and the agreements that create those relationships by charter, included specified membership into that advisory board. So that means so many people are appointed by the local assembly, so many seats are appointed by local tribal concerns, so many seats are free at will from the public. And we've seen that process work really well in Wrangell, and we've seen that process work really well in Sitka. That board then connects with the board of directors for our organization, both in terms of reporting and in terms of direct face-to-face engagement. If you look at this page, you'll see the list of our executive team and our CEO, Mr. Clement. I think as we've seen ourselves grow and become increasingly successful as a business, the question is, how and why would we want to do this? How and why can we do this? And we find ourselves being successful mostly because of our economy of scale. We operate enough facilities. We're large enough that we have a full finance department. We have a full HR department for recruitment. We're able to recruit and pay our medical staff at rates that are market rates, because we're competing basically for nurses and for physicians with people outside the region. We have an IT department and a full unified electronic health record that's modern. And when there's problems with it, we have a staff of full-time IT folks. It doesn't matter if the problem is in one of the smaller clinics or outside hospitals or in one of the larger clinics. It's all treated as a system. We also have a health promotion department that helps us to run things like home health and wellness programs. You can see on the next page some pictures of our clinical leadership team. And you'll see that we have Dr. Przonka, who's our medical director for the Wrangell Medical Center. Certainly one dimension of a partnership here would be, I would have an expectation that we would have a medical director for the Petersburg Hospital if we were to create a partnership. You can see Dr. Vestola, who's our leader for our hospital and our medical staff at the Mount Edgecombe Hospital. He's been with Search for over 30 years. And Dr. Bewley in Juneau, who is the medical director for all of our outpatient clinical activities. So we have a unified medical staff. It's interesting that, for the physicians that have come in Sitka and in Wrangell, there was understandably a lot of concern and a lot of worries about that. We're joining a larger staff. Our local concerns are going to be lost. We're going to lose our individuality. And this is the thing, we're not a big for-profit healthcare company from Seattle or Virginia or even from Anchorage. we know our communities and we care about our staff. And if you talk to Dr. Przonka about what her experience has been with this, it's been positive. It's been great. She and the other members of the staff at Wrangell have felt supported. We listen to them, we include them, and we create room for local differences because every community is a little different. If you talk, I know a lot of folks in this community know Dr. Rosell, Chuck Rosell, who worked for Sitka Community Hospital, and he came over in when we did the merger with that facility and with that medical staff. Please reach out to him, ask. You know, we have, not only have we lived up to our commitments in that partnership, but we've, in terms of the medical staff, I mean, I know they all really enjoy the support that they have. There's more medical education, opportunities for support in dealing with the problems that occur. We also have initiatives around quality incentives. We offer competitive salaries, and we we work to hold our staff to our values. You can see on the next page a picture of Mount Edgecombe Medical Center and the new Wrangell Medical Center that we just opened up in February. On the following page is some pictures of our regional clinics. Includes Ethel Lund Medical Center, which is in Juneau, which is an ambulatory care center. The Haynes Health Center and the Alicia Roberts Medical Center down on Prince of Wales Island. And then on the next is a picture of the entrance to the new Wrangell Medical Center. I would extend to all of you and offer to come over to Wrangell and tour the medical center and see what it is that we're doing there and how it's gone, and speak to the staff and find out what their experience has been in their partnership with Search in the last couple of years. So what is that? It's a critical access hospital combined with a clinic and a long-term care center. It has 8 beds in the critical access hospital, 14 beds in the long-term care center, has an expanded emergency room and an expanded primary care clinic. So I've seen the consultants report, I think it's from Navigant, was the organization that looked at the needs of Petersburg. Petersburg's a little bigger than Wrangell. So it would need to be sized for the needs of the community. So probably a little bit bigger than this. And the emphasis in this new facility is on those elements of care that are the future of healthcare as we can understand it at this time. So a focus on an enlarged emergency department, a somewhat reduced inpatient environment, an enlarged outpatient clinic with room for specialty care, with room for other ancillary care. So we have, 3D mammography and CT scanner and those types of things, a new rehab clinic for physical therapy and occupational therapy. So after the assembly meeting, I'll give you my card and feel free to contact me if you're interested, and we'll be happy to set up an opportunity for you to go over there. There's some additional pictures that show some pictures of the fit and finish in the long-term care facility and the interior of the new hospital. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor, if that's something you'd like.
Are there any questions of Dr. Brule from the Assembly? Member Tremblay.
Thank you. You mentioned partnering with the communities during the COVID crisis. The medical center here has been a true partner with the EOC, and I'm curious if you could tell us about the level of autonomy in terms of coordination of action as well as communication with the communities at large during the recent public health crisis.
Oh, great question. Sort of my life in the last 18 months. So we stood up an emergency operations center for our organization in February of 2020, and then created a direct liaison with the EOCs in our larger communities that were able to have their own EOCs. So we had membership on those EOCs. So for example, I was a member on the Sitka EOC. Eric Geddes, our Vice President of Clinics, was on the Juneau EOC. And then our medical lead in Haines was on their EOC, and our medical lead in Prince of Wales was on theirs. So what we did is we had membership of our community that was in those local EOCs, and then we would come together and exchange information about how could we support or assist those communities. We included members of local community EMS in our corporate incident command structure to ensure that local EMS services were connected in terms of things like personal protective equipment and plans of care. As we got to vaccination, we really had an extraordinary amount of access to vaccine because of our connections to the federal health system. And we, in terms of our commitment to our communities, we took that vaccine and we transported it during the holiday week by every method we could into every community we have. So we were pushing out cases of vaccine into our smallest communities, like Thorn Bay or Angoon, as well as into our larger communities like Juneau and Sitka. We were committed to caring for the people in our smallest communities at the same time we were caring for people in the big ones, because our worry was the way things usually roll is people in the bigger communities will get more and get it sooner. And so we really made a conscious effort to do that. And then we also pushed vaccine into communities where our footprint's very small. So we worked with Mr. Hochstetter to push vaccine into Petersburg. And we worked to push vaccine into Ketchikan and into other communities where we don't have a large presence. And we did that because we care about the region, quite honestly.
Does that answer your question? Member Lynn?
Yeah, thank you for coming. It gives me a chance to ask some questions that I'm trying to understand. What's the search's obligations, or I'd say assistance commitment with the through the Indian Health Service with for instance, with PIA?
PIA, the Petersburg Indian Association. Well, our obligation is that we provide healthcare to Native beneficiaries, and we provide that care and those services. Those people who are beneficiaries have, in essence, a package of healthcare that they're entitled to, the same way that I have Blue Cross Blue Shield, and so there's certain things that are covered in my care, and there are certain things that are covered in their care. Their care also includes generally travel that my care, for example, does not. And sometimes the care of a beneficiary also mandates a certain referral location. So for certain types of services, their care may mandate that they would receive that care at Alaska, the Alaska Native Health Center up in Anchorage. That really is it. So, you know, in terms of our obligations to provide care within our facilities, their healthcare package is treated the same way any other insured person's package is. So, you know, if as a Blue Cross insured person, if I need a particular kind of surgery, there's a group of physicians or physician groups that are preferred. And if I want to receive care in a different place, I can, but my coverage will be much less. So if I decide I want to go for some reason, my brother lives in Kansas and I want to go receive care there, but they're not on the preferred provider list, then I have to pay more. It's similar. But in terms of our commitment to them, they have every opportunity to receive care that anyone else does. But there's no separate line, there's no preferential line for anyone based on their native beneficiary status. On the other hand, if you sort of were to think about what's the global advantage then of us taking care of all members of a community and doing that? We're able to provide a level of service that vastly exceeds anything we were ever able to provide before we included everybody in all of our communities. So, I mean, I practiced here in the mid-90s, and if you lived in a Native community, your opportunity to see a specialist or to receive consistent primary care was extremely limited. And the opportunity to see specialists was extremely limited. And the consistency of services was very, very poor. So I hope that answers your question.
It does to some extent, yeah. And I can think of about 30 other questions to follow that, but I'll hold off on that. But to follow that up with another question for you, you know, there's a difference in between the operations of the hospital and actually the physical structure of the hospital.
Yes, sir.
What is Search willing to look at some kind of a partnership to build a new facility, but allow the operations to continue as is, or to do some kind of something in those orders?
Well, the opportunity to build a new facility would, from our perspective, the partnership would include us being able to operate the facility, and to be able to do that allows us to then expand our own abilities and include new opportunities to provide services. So what do I mean by that? Specifically, right now we're really struggling with urology. Urology is an important medical specialty. There's a real shortage of urologists, and there's a real shortage of urologists in Southeast Alaska. So we're contemplating whether or not we need to hire a urologist for our system. By having a system that's larger, that includes a larger population, it makes those types of opportunities from a business standpoint much more viable.
Okay. How about, is there opportunities without changing of looking at partnerships on providing services, health services with medical center?
Well, I think that everything could be on the table in terms of conversations, yeah, about partnerships. But the specific partnership, I guess, that I wanted to propose was the one that I outlined. But absolutely.
Thank you.
Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Brule, for spending some time with us this afternoon. You mentioned that when you first started that you're here at the invitation of the Assembly and the Mayor. Is that why you're here? Because somebody requested you to come and give a presentation, or is this more of an informational thing for us? That's the first part of that question.
Can I answer that?
Absolutely.
I invited Mr. Brule, had a conversation with Mr. Brule and asked him if he would be interested in coming and addressing the assembly. And so I put this on the agenda and he wanted to come in person, which I respect that. And the reason I did that is because as an assembly member, I hadn't had a presentation delivered to me, or the assembly hasn't, to my knowledge, from Search. And I don't think the community has been able to listen to the opportunities available to them from Search organization. So I realized we have passed a resolution at our last meeting to have the medical center move forward with the first phase of the hospital and doing geotech studies and trying to find a cost and funding for a location to be prepared, a pad. So that's how Mr. Brule ended up in Petersburg today.
Follow-up question, are you giving this presentation to the hospital board or folks? Oh, are you giving this presentation to the hospital board while you're in town as well?
I'd be happy to give this presentation to the hospital board, although I'm intending to be at some meetings in Juneau tomorrow morning, so it's not been part of my agenda, but I'd be happy to work that out.
Okay, thank you. And so was the hospital board and or hospital board president or the CEO of the hospital, did you like notify folks that you were coming to town to give this presentation? Or, you know, where I'm coming from here is it's great information. But as far as I'm concerned, you know, the hospital board has the autonomy to do what they see fit for medical facilities in Petersburg and medical care in Petersburg. I happened to sit in on the hospital board meeting many years ago when Search gave a presentation and Peace Health gave a presentation, and they were both interesting. It didn't seem at that time that the hospital board was interested. So it's just, for me, it's, you know, I appreciate you coming here, but it's just a little disconcerting to have you address the assembly with the presentation when more or less the hospital board is the entity that will be making those decisions with the support of the assembly. So it's a little disconcerting to me to have this happen first as opposed to talking to the hospital board first.
I offer you my apologies. There's no disrespect intended.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess that could be my fault, but I thought if it was on a public record, then everybody would have access to the presentation by Dr. Brule today. So, Member Tremblay?
Thank you. I had a somewhat related question. Given the fact that we have a publicly elected hospital board, you had mentioned that the local board would be appointed by assembly and then also as appointed by, was it PIA that would do that? And then, so could you explain a little more about what a local board would look like, given that it would be no longer publicly elected?
Well, I suppose it could be publicly elected. I mean, I'm just telling you what our past partnerships, how they've looked. So, and the way they've looked is that different elements of the community have had input to appoint members to the advisory board. And so that's been a successful approach, but I don't think that's necessarily the only approach. Yeah.
Any other questions? Member Norheim?
One question about if you're proposing that you would like to build the hospital here. Do you feel that building these hospitals, it wouldn't overstretch your budget? My main concern would be when a bigger corporation comes in, you know, they build a thing, they say they promise they're going to do, and then they cut back on it. And well, you become the primary healthcare provider here, and there's nothing we can really do because we've already lost the other hospital or our current hospital. And I had both my kids in sick. I think the facility was amazing. The care was amazing. It was way better than the stuff I'd heard from other hospitals. But it is a concern that you have a hospital in Sitka, which, as you say, you pay for travel. It's not that far away. It's a little inconvenient to go somewhere else to have your kids. but you are fine and not overstretching yourselves financially in building a hospital here as well?
No, we're financially strong, and we would be willing to provide assurances in putting together that partnership that would address those, hopefully address those misgivings or concerns. But I think those concerns are certainly understandable. Yeah, yeah. I guess I would point to, again, I would point to the existing success of our operations in all of our communities.
Any other questions of Dr. Brule? Member Len?
I want to follow up to Member Tremblay's question about, so what you have in the other communities is advisory boards. What is the authority of those boards? Simply just advisory? Do they have any, authorities to say, yeah, this is what we want to mandates may not be the right word, but to say this is what we want in this community. What's the relationship? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, well, the relationship is that the leadership of those boards reports to and communicates with the leadership of the search board. And the boundaries on our ability to provide services and to grow new service lines are really, the boundaries of reimbursement and business. I mean, the approach to our facilities is to be able to expand services as we're able while maintaining a financial viability. So that really is, in the end, the thing that puts really puts the limits on, everyone would love to be able to provide everything in every place, and that's not realistic. And I think that speaks to your question as well. So an example might be an MRI. I mean, we would love to be able to put an MRI in Wrangell. Of course, many people in Wrangell would love to be able to get an MRI in Wrangell. The business reality is probably that, well, I know it just doesn't, it's really not given the numbers of people that are there, et cetera. So there's the reality of that. And so I know that folks would love that. Also the role of MRI is changing in medicine, and probably in the future is not as big. On the other hand, we've made a commitment to, for example, increase the quality of mammography throughout our system. And we've placed 3D mammography in all of our regional clinics and in the Wrangell Medical Center. And there was so much concern coming from people about the importance of breast health and the importance of women's health that we made the decision that we'll do that, even though from a business point of view, it doesn't quite pencil out in all the locations where we put that. So it's a balance. Yeah. And there has to be, obviously, there has to be trust for that kind of a relationship to work.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Dr. Brule? Thank you for coming today, Dr. Brule, and safe travels back to Juneau.
Great time. Yeah.
And that brings us to the last officer to report today, and that will be PMC's CEO, Phil Hofstetter.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Brule, for showing up as well. I hope we get a chance to chat after this. I just want to make a few comments. Number one, I guess I was a little surprised with the agenda, and I would like to ask the assembly or the mayor to in the future, if the PMC board, hospital board is notified of healthcare related items, I think we would make a lot more progress if we had some of these conversations so they're not happening at an assembly meeting. I guess I'll comment on a couple of things. Operations is really key to me in the function, not just in our staff, but in patient care and in patient services. I've spent a lot of years in rural Alaska as well, and I know how hard it is to have staff and continuity of staff. That's near and dear to me, and I'll protect that for a long time. It's good to hear that Search is willing to provide alternative partnership opportunities. I think that there are a lot of options for partnership. You know, the issue I think and the challenge I think is that we define those. So when we had our work session together, one of the comments I made was that collaboratively is moving forward collaboratively, that we're all saying the same thing, that we all have the same philosophy and moving forward as Petersburg Medical Center and providing those services. And then when we approach an entity, you know, Search, that we help define what those services look like so that we can work together. You know, there's nothing as disruptive as change within a small operation such as Petersburg Medical Center and providing services. So those are my concerns. I guess, you know, one complementary effect of Search was the vaccines. I mean, I have to say, providing those vaccines, there was no red tape. We were provided those vaccines and we operationalized those, and we were able to deliver those locally in the community. And that was very, you know, that's probably a good example of how we could potentially work together. But again, you know, we have a lot of longtime staff. We have medical staff. We have 5 providers here. That the average provider is 7 years, has been here. And you know, it's difficult to say. I would challenge that against any rural community in Alaska today, that we have probably the most continuity of our staff and our medical staff in particular. We have a physician that's been there, you know, in and out of 30 years. We have 12 years, 7 years, 3 years, and then 1 year. We have a great succession of physicians here and a great staff, just like Jennifer Brunner, our Chief Nursing Officer, reported today. So it's a little, I find myself in a little bit of an awkward situation. I feel like we're competing and when we should be partnering. And so I feel like this is just, you know, an unfortunate, you know, agenda. So I asked the Assembly again to encourage collaboration, and I'll be speaking with Dr. Rule. It's nice to see you. I did have a chance to meet with Dr. Rule last year, which seems like 10 years ago, right? So, so thank you. That's all I had.
Any questions of Mr. Hofstadter today? Member Norheim?
Did Search reach out to you while we were, say, further back in planning building this new hospital?
I've had a couple of meetings with Search. I had a meeting with Dr. Brule, Mark Walker, Dan Neumeister, and Eric Geddes about a year and a few months ago. And I did bring that up at the work session, just as a conversation similar to the presentation that we heard today. You know, again, I think partnership opportunity is really important. I just think that we need to define those so that we're providing services to our community in the best interests of the community. You know, there's different ways you can, you know, and talked about business models. There's different ways to do mergers and partnerships. It's just many, many different ways. It's not just one way to do it. We just have to make sure, you know, that we, when we move forward, that that's something that we can live with, not just 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, you know, 15 years. You know, PMC has been in providing services for 100 years in this community. So, you know, having the ability to keep moving forward and maintain the operations is near and dear to anyone that's in this community. So I liked what, you know, I think one of the benefits of Search potentially within the tribal system is the specialties. You know, having some of the ancillary services and specialists is something that we, you know, would be something that we can't potentially do. And those are certain areas like urologist would be a great example. All the other specialties, pediatrics, specialty pediatrics, ENT services, you know, all the different specialists that are out, neurology, you name it. Those are, that infrastructure and the ability to network with that is really key. You know, and I've tried a few times to meet with, it wasn't with Dr. Brule, it was with Dan Neumeister when he was available. And I, you know, unfortunately, I didn't make a lot of headway in some of those connections. And again, you know, the past year we've been consumed with COVID. So, you know, I think it's a little bit, I mean, I don't criticize anything. I just, you know, just looking forward to moving forward, and some sort of partnership opportunity is important. You know, it seems like, well, you know, what we've been doing the last year, and you know, when I look at Dr. Brule and, you know, where we are today, it's just, you know, I think this meeting is just a little bit sooner than we'd want to have expected.
Any other questions of Mr. Hofstadter? I've just got a comment, I guess. I understand your frustration, I guess you could call it, and I didn't do this to disrupt anything or throw a wrench in the spokes. I didn't feel, like I said earlier, that I know I hadn't been involved in any conversations with search, and you would like the assembly, and I guess in this case it would be me, the mayor, who put this item, asked this item to be on the agenda, the same respect to be invited to, if, you know, evidently you met with Search and Peace Health as being an elected official. I know we work autonomously from the hospital board, but I would have appreciated to have been involved in those meetings, and maybe there was an invite sent out and I just missed it, you know. So anyway, I just thought I'd air that concern. So any other comments or?
Oh, yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hofstadter, I think I'm just going to restate what I said when we had our work session and our resolution. And I felt, although it wasn't unanimous, 6 of us did say that we supported the path that we're on right now. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. And I just want to lay the fears that I've heard from some of your staff that we're going in a different direction. But I think I can say with confidence that we're comfortable with the direction we're going right now. And we want to work collaboratively with you. We want to stay informed. That said, I don't see any issue at all with exploring different options for the future, particularly if things don't work out. That's, you know, we never want to take anything off the table. And I would encourage you and the hospital board to work as collaboratively as possible with other entities within the region so that we can make us all healthier. You know, obviously we're not going to have a urologist here in town. But it'd be good if we could access those services and work on some sort of plan where, you know, it makes everything better. But I feel we decided on a course right now, and until we have a new resolution, a new direction, I think you need to tell your employees that this resolution is what currently stands from what we want to do.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Hofstadter? Okay, thank you, Phil. That brings us to the mayor's report. We, as a community over Mayfest, received a letter from the new Norwegian ambassador to the United States, Anniken R. Krutnes, and a copy of the letter is attached. So the clerk and I, or the clerk, drafted up a letter, and I intend to send Ambassador Krutnes an invitation to next year's Mayfest. Mayor Jensen's attendance at summer assembly meetings. I will be starting fishing this month, so I may not be available to attend assembly meetings through September. And like last year, I said the same thing, but then I've attended most of the meetings. It just depends on how delivery days fall and so forth. So we're seeking letters of interest. The Assembly is seeking letters of interest from borough residents who wish to serve the community by filling the vacant seat on the following boards and commissions until October 2021 municipal election. We still have 1 vacant seat on the Planning Commission and 2 vacant seats on the Public Safety Advisory Board. And letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the borough office located at 12 South Nordic Drive, or by mailing to Post Office Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833, or by emailing to dthompson@petersburgak.gov. And add a little, one more thing to the mayor's report. Last Tuesday, Rear Admiral Moore, who took place of Rear Admiral Bell in the District 17 Coast Guard, was in town. I didn't have a time to meet with him at the planned time. He met briefly with the borough manager. Also with him was Captain Steve White, who used to be on the Anacapa here in Petersburg. I just happened to be having coffee with a group of friends, and Steve White, knowing, different locals around town, went to the coffee shop and didn't see him in the local coffee shop. So they got sent our direction, and here he comes. And anyway, that was about 7:30 in the morning. I got invited over to the mooring to meet with the new admiral, and met the new skipper of the Anacapa, a young lady. Can't recall her name, but it was very nice. And I expressed the thankfulness that Petersburg has for having a Coast Guard presence in Petersburg. We talked briefly about the upcoming fleet interchange. It sounds like they're going to go from, according to our lobbyist email, that go from 4 buoy tenders to 3. And in the conversation, it sounded like Admiral Moore seemed to think that Petersburg had, I wouldn't say a leg up, but had what it would take to keep a ship here with the housing and so forth. So I guess we just need to keep expressing our interest. It wasn't as, he didn't say, yeah, well, you'll get a new buoy tender, but we did have a conversation about that. So that is it, unless there are any questions from the mayor's report. And if there are no questions, I'll turn it over to Manager Giesbrecht to give his report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On May 21st, the state of Alaska background check program had a cyber attack and was still down on Friday. I'm not sure if it's still back up yet. DHSS no longer has access to some of the electronic data. Hard copy and instructions can be found online, but the process is extremely slow. And we're still trying to vet possible employees at the manor. Cummings Custom Woodworking has acquired all the required permits, is working with Reed Brothers to coordinate the pilings going in for the deck at the manor. Johnson Controls was up at the manor last week to check the fire alarm system. Everything's in really good shape. We also completed our boiler inspection, and Southeast Extinguishers will be here in June to service the kitchen hood system and extinguishers. Thanks to the PMC doctors who continue to see residents at the manor for routine appointments, assisted living. Mindy and Sheilyn have been meeting with Dr. Heyer as a physician liaison between the facilities at least monthly, going very well. Water staff was performing the annual spring maintenance on our air relief valves on the Cabin Creek pipeline, and triennial lead and copper monitoring was completed with all samples within acceptable ranges. The annual consumer confidence report for calendar year 2020 is available on the website. Rock and Road continues on the Scow Bay Pump Station project. Excavation for the Southside Gravity Sewer and Manhole is complete. Electrical work has commenced with the electrical inspection scheduled for June 9th. Pump testing and startup should occur on the 16th of June, and final connections to the live mains will occur after startup, and the final concrete aprons will be poured and the site cleaned up. We're scheduled for June 30th completion on that project. The annual SEPA shutdown is ongoing, still ongoing. Carl? Yeah, okay. The transition to the diesel plant went smoothly, and our equipment is handling the loads very well. We will run the blind slew hydro as much as possible during the shutdown to conserve fuel at the plant. SEPA will have various contractors in Petersburg during the shutdown to perform maintenance on the feeder breakers at the Scow Bay substation and to inspect various transmission poles on the island. The library summer programs started June 1st. This year, there are programs for all ages. Not enough room to list them all, but sign up online at the library, or you can go in person at the library and they'll help you through the process. Thank you to First Bank, Friends of Petersburg Libraries, and the many local businesses and individuals who make our summer programs possible. This year, we raised over $8,200 more than ever before. On June 1st, 2021, Petersburg 911 activated a new public safety service. Persons with AT&T cell phones and in need of emergency assistance will have the option to send a text message to 911. This new text to 911 service is being implemented for the hearing and speech impaired citizens, or when speaking out loud would put the caller in danger. Text 911 also works when on the edge of cellular networks where there might be not enough voice coverage, but a text can get through. Again, this is just for AT&T at the moment. They're working with GCI for them to get the right equipment at GCI to also support this. Parts have shipped from Motorola for the new E911 dispatch system. Once all the parts are here, Procom will schedule the installation date. Reminder to the public, our new launch ramp permits are due starting June 1st. And we had our first tour ship stop last week. Seemingly everything went well. The tour ship schedule is available in the newspaper and on the borough website. EMS staff has been helping volunteers with skills related to the eMERGE E4 course. This is the State of Alaska online EMT course. Search and rescue had a successful mission on Ravens Roost in May. They utilized their rope rescue skills to rescue a hiker who was stuck on a cliff. And EMS also had a record-breaking 33 calls in the month of May. Our streets crew dug into the 8th Street to install a sewer connection for the new PIA duplex, and that project is coming along really well. An undersized storm drain culvert near the intersection of Excel and 7th Street was replaced with a larger diameter pipe that should help prevent flooding during future rain events. To assist OBI Seafoods with their COVID testing and mitigation efforts, the U-turn at the north end of Main Street was closed off beginning June 1st. This change is temporary and will remain in effect only until the end of the processing season or until such time as OBI decides it is no longer necessary. We are continuing to work through FEMA processes to obtain grant funding for the repair of the flood damage at the Public Works Yard. Federal grants require lots of paperwork, but we are hopeful that the result will be full funding for repairs to the culvert and slope that failed during the early December rain event last year. Thanks to Jody for assisting us with this laborious process. Continuing work at the motor pool shop project. Most of the interior demolition work is now complete and prep work continues on the structural steel. The contractor is preparing to demo the roofing and siding and then begin putting the building back together. The department's new mobile column lifts have arrived and the testing is in progress. A manufacturer's representative will be visiting Petersburg later this month to conduct training on the new equipment. And congratulations to Scott Burt and Julie Anderson at Parks and Rec for their lifeguard instructor and water safety instructor certificates. This class also hosted 2 Petersburg School District employees and Wrangell Parks and Rec Department. 6 individuals attended the class with a total of 11 certifications earned. Parks and Rec will be hosting another lifeguard course. Please call if you're interested in summer work as a lifeguard for more information, and they can set you up on when the courses are scheduled. And if you haven't noticed, the playground equipment for Sandy Beach not only arrived, but volunteers from the Rotary and all the community worked most of the end of last week and all through the weekend, and the playground is complete and up and ready for use. I think there's still some equipment down there cleaning up, so be careful if you're down in the area. But thanks to all the volunteers involved in that. That's it. Most questions, sir.
Any questions of the manager on his report? Okay, with that being done, and we've been in the meeting an hour and 40 minutes, I think we'd like to take a 5-minute break and then we'll reconvene and we'll give people opportunity to leave if they need to, and we'll move forward. The first ordinance is ordinance 2021-09. This is an ordinance adopting the budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. This is the third and final reading. Entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its third reading.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made with a second. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a couple amendments to this motion.
Okay.
The first one is in recognition of the dedication of the many hours that the members of the EOC have dedicated to keeping our community safe this past year, I'd like to make a motion to designate from the Borough Contingency Fund $10,000 to be awarded to the EOC members at the manager's discretion.
Second.
Okay, discussion on that amendment. Seeing none. Clerk call the roll on that amendment.
Taylor,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark.
Yes. Okay, that amendment to the budget passes in this third reading. And Member Kinsinger, do you have another amendment?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to amend the budget to include not more than $40,000 to develop conceptual designs for the construction of replacement or upgrades to the Banana Point and Papke's Landing docks. Funds would be designated from the Property Development Fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Member Kinsinger, seconded by Member Lynn. Discussion. So this would come from the Property Development Fund, is that correct?
Yes, and I believe Finance Director Jody Tao could, there's, I believe, over $300,000 currently in that fund.
Correct. Well, currently there's about 844,000, but then if you remove the 480,000 that's currently budgeted for next year, if you remember, that includes the $450,000 placeholder for the aquatic center improvements, then there'd be approximately $364,000 in this fund remaining.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. Any other discussion? Member Lynn?
Yeah, is that just a question there, and that would be for conceptual designs at Papke's, I assume? Is that that's what we're talking about?
Right, just to refresh the assembly, we put on as one of our budget priorities, development of marine facilities in the area. And the idea is that if we have something, we need to have something in hand if we're going to try and have an opportunity to possibly get money out of the new infrastructure fund if it does pass Congress. And we have to have more than sketches on a napkin done by any of us up here. And the idea would be that this might not be exactly what would happen, but it'd be possibly a starting point. I think anybody that uses those facilities realizes they're very important for the economic viability of the area. They're very important for people that recreate in the area, and they're not exclusively used by any particular part of the community, but they're used by the entirety of the borough.
Okay, any other discussion? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a question. So the $40,000 for both Banana Point and Papke's, that would get us conceptual drawings for upgrades to the facilities?
When we originally discussed this, I think everybody realizes is that what we would like to have might not necessarily be what we want to get. So the idea was to have possibility a phased approach. So if we couldn't get maybe what would take for our ideal of that would cost many millions of dollars and we only can get $1 million, well, then we could phase it in over the years. And my hope would be if that doesn't happen, then at least we could maybe identify some money to upgrade these facilities to make them at least safe.
Thank you.
Member Lynn?
Yeah, I'd like to see the manager weigh in because he was part of the discussions of that, of why these were picked and what the thinking was, if we could, please.
Just to clarify, just to make sure I understand what the assembly, what we had discussed was a set of, documents for Papke's, like you said, conceptual drawings that kind of outlined some ideas to do down there. That included, and these were, we got this quote from Alan Murph, would be, potentially up to 2 revisions to those, and we'd get to those revisions by review of the assembly or public meetings, however the assembly chose to look at it. And then at Banana Point, it was to finalize the engineering drawings on replacing the log booms, that are all going bad at the moment. So just making sure that that's what the assembly wishes to be done.
So Member Kinsinger, just to clarify after the manager's input, this up to $40,000 is for both Banana Point and Pappy's or just for the conceptual drawings for Pappy's?
No, it's for both. When we had the meeting with Alan Murphy, he quoted us approximately $10,000 for Banana Point and I believe $25,000 for Pappy's.
Okay, and I have another, I don't know if it's a question or more of a concern, but state of Alaska still owns the Pappy's Landing facility, so we go forward with spending the money on a drawing, and I think the last deal, for lack of a proper term, that the state offered us was all three or none, including Entrance Island and Hobart Bay and Kupernoff and Pappy's. So, you know, what road do we go down? If, you know, should we spend the money on conceptual drawings? Can we go do work on the dock? I know there's been some personal repairs done, the same as over at Kupernoff, if I'm not mistaken. So that's concerning to me, I guess. If we don't have permission to go work on the, you know, to apply this design to the facility, if we don't have, you know, rights to it. So. Remember, Len?
Yeah, you know, you're making a good point there. And my thinking though, is that from the state perspective now, there is no money available. That isn't going to happen. But we still have needs in the borough. And I think we got to also figure out, as the manager said earlier, how we're going to go forward. I think that the money's not lost, even though they own it, because that gives us, I think, a leg up going forward in any kind of negotiations in the future. Even if we don't go further than the conceptual drawings, at least we got some idea where we as the borough wants to proceed. And I think it needs to be as a borough as a whole, not as little entities within myself.
Any other member, Miucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we move forward with this, are we still going to be communicating with the state about having these facilities in the future? I mean, I'm just trying to sort out, okay, we have conceptual drawings and let's just say everything was great and we got money to do all this work. And if we don't own the facilities, then, I mean, do we need to do this at the same time if that's what the direction we're heading? Or I'm just trying to see what the assembly is thinking here. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. How long ago was it, the last communication we have with the state? 2 years, 3 years? It's been a while, and I can't remember the name of the engineer we talked to, but the deal was dead. Remember, Ken Singer?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think it's very important for the borough to move ahead on these projects. I can tell you what's going to happen if we wait for the state to do something, and all you need to do is take a look at both facilities today and just imagine what they're going to look like 5 years from now. So I would propose that, yes, part of this process, but that doesn't require money. We just have to direct the manager to enter in negotiations again with the state and see what sort of arrangement we can work out. I mean, my perspective is that that's been one of the biggest problems for doing anything, is we've had so many different entities, government type entities, that have had control of these facilities, and none of them seem to want to talk to each other. And anytime anybody, concerned private citizen, talks to them, they say, well, we can't talk to you, we can only talk to a designated public entity, and the logical one would be the borough. So if we use that as an impediment not to do anything, well, nothing will happen. So at some point we have to start this process.
Member Tremblay.
Thank you. I'll be voting to support this. I think it makes sense to show the borough's support of the long-term use of these facilities. And if the state isn't going to fulfill its obligation to keep them up, we put our best foot forward with the idea of stating that these are important to our community members, and therefore we need to imagine what the future of them will look like. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the drawings may come up with.
Member Bucci?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So is that something that the assembly wants to do, is direct the city manager to?
Well, that isn't part of this discussion right now. We're on an amendment to.
Sure. Okay, I'll wait.
So let's not, yeah. So is there any other discussion on the proposed amendment to take $40,000 from the $40,000 from the property development fund up to $40,000 to get conceptual drawings for Banana Point and Papke's Landing. Is there any more discussion on that? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Okay, the second proposed amendment to third reading of this year's budget passes with a 5-1 vote with Mayor Jensen opposed. Is there any other proposed amendments to the budget? Member Lynn?
Yes, I have a comment and then I have two proposed amendments. The first one has to do with the fire truck. $650,000 is quite a chunk of change. One of my concerns is, and I support going forward with it, but I also think that this is one of those things that could get out of hand real quick in terms of you could put all kinds of whistles and bells and widgets and gadgets on this thing that we really frankly don't need, one, and two, that are going to cause us to bring technicians in to fix all the time and do some other things. So I think this particular project needs oversight, and I would propose that the manager take the lead so that we can get an RFP that we put out that we can all support. And I just make that as a comment, not as a motion, but I think it's really important that we have some leadership into this.
Okay, and then you have a proposed amendment?
Okay, and
see
then
there's one listed
I
on
have
there.
two proposed amendments, and I'll start with, I propose to amend the budget to transfer 46,000 from Fund 430 reserves to the IRA 2 Street Sewer Capital Project Fund in order to fully fund construction, engineering, and inspection contingency needs for the IRA 2 Street Sewer Project.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and the second, this was requested from Utility Director Hagerman to move $46,000. Is there any discussion on this? Clerk, call a roll on that amendment.
Taylor,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Mark,
Yes, so that amendment passes unanimously. And Member Lynn, you have another proposed amendment?
I do. I move to amend the fiscal year 22 budget to set $10,000 aside to contract for snow plowing on roads around Papke's Landing that were promised in the borough petition. The money I proposed to shift money from the general fund in the public works budget from the road striping to pay for snow plowing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to add $10,000 back into the budget for plowing at Papke's Landing and to come out of the road striping section of the fund, whichever funds that would come out of, utilities or something.
Yeah, from
So any discussion on that? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just for me, how much was the road striping budget request? Whoever.
Through the mayor, 25,000 was the total. I don't know if you take 10,000 out of it, if there's enough to do all of the striping. We'd have to ask them when we got to that point.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so this $10,000, this would be for the borough to plow the streets or for private enterprise to?
private enterprise contracting.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this proposed amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
No.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Okay, that proposed amendment passes with a 5-1 vote with Member Mucci opposed. Is there any other proposed amendments to this year's budget? Member Kinsinger?
Yes, one more. And I don't know if it has to be an amendment to the budget, but I would like to designate funds from the passenger head tax to be used for the maintenance of the temporary bathrooms.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on that? I'm just kind of curious how much is in that fund, and we don't really have a operation figure for those bathrooms at this time, do we?
No, we don't. I believe there's 35,000 from 2 years ago. Is that correct?
April 2021, there's $50,000 in marine passenger fee.
Member Tremblay.
Yeah, and from my understanding, part of the questions of the operations and maintenance of those bathrooms is the question of funding, because each department is, it's a slight hot potato situation of not my budget, not my budget. And so by designating funds from that marine passenger fee for this particular purpose, given the fact that it was intended for this use, that creates, at least the funding question is solved with this.
Member Lynn.
Yeah, so would this be in perpetuity, or are we just talking about for this year? Well, I guess I got some problems with this from the standpoint of taking funds. That really should be a manager's decision of where you put. But are we talking just this year, or are we talking about in perpetuity of those funds, or where are we at?
My intent is just for this year, just figuring out a way to pay for it for this summer. And yeah, we can always revisit this, but this is just specifically for this budget.
So if we vote to use the money from the head tax money, what about staff? Do we have staffing for this?
Not currently. I think probably the best approach to staffing it would be to see if we can get a summer seasonal temp that would be willing to clean it at the frequency that, you know, we'd have some conversations about the hours of operation and, you know, what is that going to take? But we'd likely hire a summer temp.
Member Tremblay.
Thank you. And it's partly also my understanding that that's another form of the hot potato currently happening within departments, staffing issues within departments, difficult, like having difficulty prioritizing it, given that it is a standalone entity outside of each of the, you know, would it be municipal staff because it's in the municipal parking lot? Would it be harbor because it's close to them? Would it be Parks and Rec because they maintain other bathrooms? So given all those questions, I kind of enjoy the standalone flexibility that this requires. It is that way a contained unit of funding connection to the manager as a project. And then also, this is in a way an outgrowth of the task force that was formed to discuss visitor industry actions in town and ways to facilitate smoother visitor relationship to town. So in my mind, this is by the assembly having that task force, the task force working with the manager, this fund getting established. To me, that's all very connected. So it'll be interesting to see what happens as time goes. But for this standalone year, to me, this makes sense.
Member Kensinger, you had another comment?
Yes, I wasn't trying to, how shall we say, guide the hand of the manager, but I just wanted to have an identified funding source that he could draw upon to make this happen.
So the manager mentioned hiring a summer temporary. So does that comes with benefits or they get no benefits? I'm sure they have some kind of liability insurance coverage with temporaries. I'm just looking, you know.
Temporary, no. If it's put in place as a seasonal position, then it comes with benefits. I think until we get a handle on it, I would use it. I would push for putting a temporary in place. But you know, that's subject to us finding somebody too.
So if we can't find somebody to do it, then they don't open, or I mean, then do we have to pick somebody from the harbor or utilities, or what do we do?
I'd start off with that. You know, we probably have somebody from Parks and Rec or the harbor, or maybe split it between them until we can get somebody in place. Which neither of them are gonna like it, but you know, the King Solomon approach.
I guess that was kind of my concern when we spent the money to buy these, how we were gonna own it, how we were gonna operate them, you know, and so anyway, here we are. Member Norheim?
Yeah, I was wondering if like the snow plows out the road, could you just contract this for the summer and then avoid that whole problem?
And that likely might be where we go if we can find our local janitor service that provides service for this building will be somebody we'll talk to, but they've had their own staffing problems. So it's As many of you have seen, we're having a staffing problem throughout the borough, and I don't want to make promises I can't keep. We will figure it out and try to get them open at some point.
Berlin?
Yeah, why choose the passenger fee? Could that not be taken out of the bed tax fund and paid for that way rather than out of the passenger fee and save that for a bigger project?
Kinsinger?
You're correct. You could spend it out of the 4% tax that we impose upon lodgings in town. But one of the things that we have to be able to do if we're collecting this tax from the cruise industry, which is primarily where it comes from, is to be able to show to them the benefit that they get from paying this tax. And I think there's a really good argument to be made that by providing adequate restroom facilities for their passengers, that we're fulfilling the purpose of that tax in the first place, and not just developing, some sort of slush fund that we're going to use for something else down the road. My reference to that would be to look at the issues that occurred in Juneau, which they were dealing with millions of dollars, not thousands of dollars like we are here. But I'd like to avoid that type of situation in the past. This is a real easy sell to those companies because, their passengers need to use the restroom. And right now, and as has happened in past years, a lot of the restroom use has fallen upon the local businesses in town, and they've been absorbing the cost of cleaning their restrooms and supplying those supplies. And by having a designated location that's right in the center of town, I think we're going to eliminate a lot of the conflicts that have occurred over trying to find a place to use the restroom in the town.
Member Mucci, you have a comment?
Not at this time.
Yeah, thought I saw your hand up. All right, this amendment we've been discussing is to take $10,000, use the money from the head tax to pay for the operation of the bathrooms. Clerk, call the roll.
David,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Okay, that amendment passes as well. Are there any other amendments to the third reading of this year's budget? And so that's an unknown figure. So I'm seeing potentially $95,000, but some of it coming from just transfers of money added to this year's budget, just for people listening at home. So discussion on the main motion to adopt the budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, and its third and final reading. Is there any discussion on the budget as amended a few times? Okay, I'm still concerned, like Member Lynn talked about the $650,000 fire truck. Couple reasons. I'm not going to support the budget like I did in the second reading, and the fire truck's one. And the amendment was made at the first reading to add more funding in for KFSK, even though they're getting a couple $100,000 from the federal government. And a couple of these amendments that were just made today, I have trouble with, so I won't be supporting the budget as amended. Any other input on the budget? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Chelsea, Mark.
No. Okay, this year's budget passes with a 5-1 vote, the mayor opposed. That brings us to new business, ordinance 2021-11, an ordinance amending chapter 4.30 Alaska Remote Seller Sales Tax Code of the Borough Code. So I entertain a motion to approve this ordinance.
So move.
Second.
Okay, discussion, and I believe this is in regards to the presentation we had earlier from Mr. Singletary. So any discussion on this? It's the first reading of the ordinance. Clerk, call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Okay, first reading of that ordinance passes unanimously. That brings us to the next item under new business, resolution 2021-06. A resolution of the Petersburg Borough setting the millage rates for the fiscal year July 2nd, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. If approved, the resolution will set the fiscal year 2022 mill rate at 11.5 mills. Entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
Move.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, I believe, seconded by member Tremblay. Any discussion on resolution 2021-06? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could somebody tell me when these bonds go away? When they're all paid off? It doesn't have to happen today, but just for my knowledge, when they all go away or?
A lot of them, oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
I was just gonna say, it's all in the audit, but we can easily provide a report to the assembly on when each bond pays off. There's different terms and different dates for different bonds.
Thank you. I was just looking for the date.
Okay, yeah, like the manager said, there are many different dates. So anyway, back to resolution 2021-06. Any other discussion on that? Setting the mill rate 11.5 mills for this year. Clerk, call the roll.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Taylor, Bob,
Yes.
Okay, resolution 2021-06 passes unanimously. Brings us to resolution 2021-07. This is a resolution of the Petersburg Borough Assembly authorizing Petersburg to provide and certify certain information that will permit the Southeast Alaska Power Agency to obtain financing for a submarine cable replacement project and participate in the Alaska Municipal 2021 bond insurance. Resolution 2021-07, if adopted, will permit SEPA to obtain this financing for the submarine cable replacement project. Entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by member Mucci, seconded by member Lynn. Any discussion on this resolution? Clerk, call the roll.
Mayor, I just have a
Oh, member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. So are the other communities involved with this, Ketchikan and or Wrangell, are they passing similar resolutions?
I would believe they would be, but member
Yeah.
Lynn, you have an accurate
Yes,
answer?
the answer is yes. All three communities have to pass this in order for us to apply for the bonding under for this, through the state.
Thank you.
And they're also, it's paid for also by the three communities. The annual interest, I can't remember the exact amount, but the annual interest on this bond is a little over $800,000, if I remember correctly. Pretty sizable amount.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Member Lind. So it also mentions on the Exhibit C there about the $11 million. It says finance improvements to existing transmission lines. So is this just to make the existing transmission lines able to deal with the new cable? Or how on that? Thank you.
This replaces essentially the submarine cable in total. And we may not bond for the full amount, but if we don't get the insurance money, that I talked about earlier, and a few things, then it would be up to this amount, but it may be less than this when we're all done. We just don't know yet.
Mr. Mayor, my last question is how much money do we have in electrical reserves?
Does either Utility Director Hagerman or the Finance Director Tao have the number? Is that a number you can get?
I don't know.
I mean,
Approximately 6 million.
Approximately. Thank you.
any other discussion on this resolution? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Okay, that resolution passes unanimously. That brings us to the next item under new business D, IRA 2 Street Sewer Award Recommendation. Utility Director Hagerman recommends the Assembly award the IRA 2 Street Sewer Replacement.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
you're reading the wrong one. repeal of Petersburg Borough Health Mandate number 3.
Where are we? I gotta love this new format. No, this is the packet, actually. It's not on there. Yes, I did. And just like the manager's report wouldn't come up on here as well. Gotta love it. Okay, I'll follow this. So let's throw the iPad out the window. So we are on item D. I guess it's the right letter, or maybe it's not, but anyway, it's a repeal of Petersburg Borough Public Health Mandates number 3, number 6, and number 10 immediately. Repeal of the Petersburg Borough Public Health Alert number 4 immediately, and expiration of the Petersburg Public Health Mandate number 5 effective June 30th, 2021 to coincide with the expiration of the declaration of disaster. Entertain a motion to repeal these mandates.
I'd like to amend the motion.
Second,
Yeah.
so it's on the floor.
Second. And then I'd like to make a motion to amend, it was suggested by Clerk Thompson to consider each separately by motion. So considering mandate number 3, the suspension of in-person public participation at meetings standalone.
So, yeah, that should have been something, maybe there was, we'll just go with it, but it could have been amended during the amendment of the agenda at the start. So is this a recommendation of yours, Clerk Thompson?
In the narrative, it does say Clerk Thompson suggests considering each mandate alert separately by motion. You can do it how you choose.
I feel comfortable with doing it as a block.
But I can't second it, just for the point of conversation.
Okay, motion's been made to amend this and address these mandates. And motion's been made by Member Tremblay, seconded by Member Mucci. So discussion. So we'll vote on that, other than if we don't vote to change this procedure and address them separately, we will vote on them as a group.
Mayor Jensen, I didn't really think that it needs to be amended in order to take them up separately. I just thought someone could make a motion to, whatever you prefer. Whoever makes the motion, you decide whether you're going to take them up separately or you're going to do it as a block.
Okay, so we have made the amendment proposed to change this, is voting on them as a group. And so we'll vote on that. And then if it passes, then that's how we'll proceed. And if not, we will vote on them as a unit. Any discussion? More discussion? Okay, let's vote on voting on them, on addressing them separately by motion. Remember, or call the roll, please, Clerk Thompson.
Bob,
No.
Dave,
No.
Taylor,
No.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Chelsea.
No.
Okay, so we will vote on them as a group. That vote to change the process, I guess you'd call it, is if I got it right, 5-1 or 4-2. It doesn't matter. It passed. It was 4 no's. So, okay. Any discussion on this proposed repeal of Petersburg Public Health Mandates? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chelsea.
Yes.
Okay, I will work off the printed agenda since letter E there is Iris Street 2. I'd entertain a motion to approve the bid award recommendation by Member Hagerman. Utility Director Hagerman recommends the Assembly award the Ira 2 Street Sewer Replacement Project to Rock and Road Construction of Petersburg for an amount not to exceed $297,180.
So moved.
There's second.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. Any discussion on this bid award? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes. Okay, that passes unanimously. That bid award does. That brings us to item F. United Fishermen of Alaska membership. Assembly Member Mucci requests consideration of a community membership with the United Fishermen of Alaska at an annual cost of $300. Entertain a motion to approve this request.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Kinsinger. Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several weeks ago, we had a request, and we had a letter requesting or wanting to know if we were interested in becoming part of this organization, and I just wanted to see it through, and I'm supporting this as we are a fishing community, and it's important to be involved with UFA, so that's what it's there for. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Member Lynn?
Yeah, I can't support this because I think it's, you know, at times we may have to take positions. Otherwise, I don't think it's appropriate for you as a borough to be members of that at this point. So I have to vote no on it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Member Tremblay?
Yeah, I had a question. I know the UFA does political endorsements. Is the borough a part of any other groups that does partisan political endorsements?
Through the mayor, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. For that reason, won't be supporting this. I think we represent the community as a whole and need to think independently and act independently. And so being a part of a group that makes those kinds of larger decisions doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Any other discussion on this request? I kind of like your position, Member Tremblay, on that, but seeing what the United Fishermen of Alaska does for the fishing industry and the the dependence on fisheries by the Petersburg community, I think I will be supporting this. So if there's no other discussion, Member Kinsinger?
Mr. Mayor, I agree with Assembly Member Tremblay and also with yourself, so I'm kind of in a dilemma. Could I suggest that we make a donation of $300 and request that we be a non-voting member?
And I believe with this, I don't believe you'd be a voting member. I'm not quite sure how the format is. Member Mucci, did you?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we could certainly look into it. I mean, it's nothing that has to happen today. We could certainly put it on the agenda for the next meeting and get some more specifics for you and go from there.
So if we pass it now, we'd be kind of locked in.
Mr. Mayor,
Mucci.
yeah, we don't have to pass it today. We can certainly maybe table it till the next meeting and have more information, or I don't know what's cleaner.
I don't know if tabling is the right thing, postpone it to a time certain, the next meeting potentially. Which I won't be at the next meeting, but we'll see where it goes. So we need a motion to postpone it until the first meeting in July.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, there's been a motion made and a second to postpone the vote on this or further discussion on this until the first meeting in July. Without any discussion, if there is no discussion, will the clerk call the roll?
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Chelsea, Taylor,
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Okay, we will address that at a later date. And I believe this item G was moved into the budget discussion, so we won't be addressing that here. And item H or I think I was maybe on the draft agenda packet. So no, that's H. Appointment of Mayor Pro Tem for the July 21st, 2021 Assembly meeting. Both Mayor Jensen and Vice Mayor Stanton Gregor will be unable to attend the June 21st, 2021 Assembly meeting. Robert's Rules instructs the Assembly to select a Mayor Pro Tem in this situation, and it could happen at the meeting, but we will take action today. So anybody have a willingness?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be willing to try it with the Assembly's support if they would be interested in having me try it.
I'd second that.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of Member Lynn leading the next meeting, that would be the first one in, be June 21st. And is Member Gregor going to be back or is he going to be gone? So would this be for the following meetings as well, or are we going to do it meeting by meeting?
No, it's just for the second meeting in June.
Okay, so that's what we're voting on, June 21st meeting. If there's no discussion, will the clerk call the roll?
Taylor,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda under action items, Alaska Natives Without Land legislation. The Assembly will consider support for the proposed landless native legislation. I basically put this on for a placeholder until we have the meeting with the congressional delegation. And I don't know, it's up to the Assembly if we want to make a decision today or wait till we see what the Senate version comes out with. And maybe there will be some changes to the text and the maps after the congressional delegation passed through Southeast. So if I guess we entertain a motion to take it, since it's up on here, taking action or on this, entertain a motion to do so, and we could vote it down and then do it later if that's the desire. So I'd entertain a motion to address this issue. And if there's no motion or second, then I guess it just goes away.
Before I make a motion, may I ask a couple questions to the manager on this?
Sure.
We've had no more correspondence. Have we had any more correspondence from our congressional delegation since the last meeting, or any other additional answers to the questions by anybody that we presented?
Through the mayor, no. I did ask Senator Murkowski's aide, Annie Hoffler, about that. And they're reluctant to provide answers because the bill may change and they don't want to be on the record when in fact it may change between one version to the next. So I'm not anticipating receiving answers from the delegation.
You have another question, Member Lynn?
I'm considering motion, but Member Kensinger, I think, has a question.
I'm confused. What are we supporting? Since there's no legislation, are we going to pass a resolution to support the House bill as it stands? I think it'd be more prudent to take this up when we actually see what the Senate bill is as well. But that's just a comment.
With that being said, we probably shouldn't be discussing it too much without a motion to have this discussion on the floor. But if there is no motion made or no second to the motion, then it could be brought up when we get farther down the road. But I just wanted to put it on there as a placeholder. And it is kind of confusing because I had a conversation with Annie Hoffler as well, and she apologized for not responding to our emails that we sent her. So anyway, Member Lynn?
Okay, I would move that we send an additional letter. There was questions asked today by some of the folks that called in that I think are very valid. And I think I think we need to send an additional letter with some of those questions and also the questions that were answered back to the congressional delegation so that they know at least, we are here trying to support all our contingency of folks.
There's a second to that.
I'll second that.
Discussion? And I guess that would kind of, that's addressing Alaska Natives Without Land legislation in a sense. So that would be the direction from the Assembly if we vote to support Member Lynn's motion to move these questions forward and our concerns. Any other discussion? Member Dornheim.
Do I need to disclose conflict of interest in this particular instance again? I guess I will, just right there.
I think you should ask, recuse yourself for personal or for financial gain reasons. So Member Norheim has offered to recuse himself from discussion on this and voting. Does the Assembly want to make a motion to let him participate or should we do, forward with his recusal? Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what we're trying to sort out is that, does Member Norheim need to recuse himself from voting on this issue, but still letting him participate in the discussion?
I think it's for both to recuse himself from discussion and voting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up, so if Member Norheim wanted to, he could speak as a visitor view related to agenda items?
I believe he would have to step down from the dais and, and go to the podium. And that's how he would proceed. But we're past that in this meeting. Member Mucci.
Sure, but in giving Member Norheim the opportunity to have some comments on this, I'd like to hear what he has to say. And I suppose we could have talked about this at the beginning of the meeting but we didn't. And I'd like to hear what he has to say. And if it's not the right time, then we can do it again later, at a later date.
Technically, I don't think we should change the way we proceed with the meeting. So technically, I believe Member Norheim would have had to step down at the time of, views related to agenda items. And then, so Member Tremblay?
Yes, based on the guidance Clerk Thompson gave us, that is the standard way that conflict of interest discussions happen. So I would actually be interested in not voting on any form of action regarding this topic at this meeting, given that we don't have any hard text of a letter to send to federal representatives. So my preference would be no action on this item for the next meeting. And then for the next meeting, for Assemblymember Norheim to be able to participate, follow the conflict of interest guidelines and give testimony under persons of interest related to the agenda. So that would be my preference.
Okay, so with that being said, with this discussion, if we vote no, we don't do anything currently, and then maybe as we get more information, we could digest it and take a formal action. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
David,
No.
Mark,
No.
Bob,
No.
Jeff, Chelsea.
No.
Okay, so we will take no action today on the Alaska Natives Without Land legislation. Communications, the next item on the agenda. And first communication is Congressman Young's press release regarding Alaska Natives land legislation. So it's here with the maps, I suppose, and the text. And then there's correspondence received since May 13th, 2021. That's also on the website for people to look at if they want to see the comments the Assembly has been receiving. Then we have Assembly discussion items is next, and fireworks ordinance. Assemblymember Norheim requests this discussion item.
So 2 years ago, we obviously allowed people to put fireworks off in town on certain days, and we had discussed a sundown clause, but decided against it. And I just said that I'd bring it up in 2 years before I didn't run for another term. And I'm just fulfilling that promise. If the Assembly would like to remove our fireworks ordinance, or not, just keep it as it is. I haven't heard any huge problems. And yeah, I'm basically just fulfilling a promise I made 2 years ago, just bringing it up.
Discussion, and I can't remember the exact context of the discussion with the fireworks ordinance, but does that still legally on the books for you could discharge fireworks on like 3rd of July, 4th of July, or whatever it is? Okay, all right. Any other comments on this fireworks ordinance? And Member Norm, like you said, has just requested this discussion item because it's an obligation to his comment from 2 years ago. Okay, seeing none. Next discussion item is Sea Otter Working Group. Assemblymember Mucci attended a meeting of the Southeast Alaska Sea Otter Stakeholder Working Group on June 3rd, 2021, and will give us his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a short report. I provided everybody with the Assembly, the working group agenda, as well as some of the PowerPoint presentations that were presented to us. Of interest to me is a sea otter photo inventory of otters in Southeast. In the past, they've done it by just somebody visually, either from a boat or somehow, or trying to sort out how many otters there are. And they've got a couple grad students, doctoral postdoc folks who are planning to lease a plane and flying at 1,000 feet, crisscrossing Southeast Alaska at 1,000 feet and photo identifying all the otters they can see in the month of June and July. I think it'll be real interesting to see what they're encountering out there, as well as there's some work being done on kelp in Southeast Alaska with the loss, or I guess with otters coming into an area and eating all the red urchins in an area. The kelp has taken on a new life, and so with that, there seems to be an increase in possibly abalone and some other species that were kind of on the decline for a while. So this kelp survey is going to be really important, as well as the otter survey. So I'll keep folks posted, but there's a couple PowerPoints that I turned into the city clerk that I think she provided with everybody. So if you have any questions, just give me a call and I'll forward you to the right person. So thank you.
Okay, any input on this discussion item?
Question.
Member Haram.
Was there any discussion in regards to, obviously the sea otters are getting very close to town now, in regards to Dungey crabbing and their effects on that near town, especially with, I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50, I would call them trash can boats, but the little Dungey skiffs. That's a lot of people that could lose, well, their job if they continue to press north as aggressively as they have been.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, part of the issue that I understand with this working group is they're struggling to deal with the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And the only way that the Southeast region is going to get traction with the Marine Mammal Protection Act is if they support a statewide movement on polar bears. Because the congressional delegation has told the Southeast folks who are working on this that it has to have statewide buy-in. It can't have just Southeast buy-in. And there's a couple of postdoc folks who are working on the relationship between Dungeness crab and otters. I mean, we all know what it is, but they're trying to sort out what % of their diet is Dungeness crab, as well as abalone, red urchin, and other critters. So yeah, it's part of the conversation. I mean, it's just like the ferry system for folks up in the interior, and people don't get it. But when you put a bunch of people out of work in Southeast Alaska because otters are devastating crab fishery, I mean, that's a big deal. Mike Miller with the Sitka tribe in Sitka, he's working with all the harvesters in Southeast Alaska, trying to figure out how to get that group to coalesce and, maybe harvest more otters. But for this thing to move forward, for any changes to happen to the Marine Mammal Protection Act, it's going to have to be a statewide, and they're going to have to show statewide support for something like this. And they're using the work they've been doing on polar bears as a way to move this issue forward. So.
Glenn?
Is there also members from the Alaska Department of Game and Fish on this group that are helping support it, and how's that all working?
Yeah, there's all kinds of groups involved. There's U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Game, University of Alaska, Sitka tribe, all the harvesters. Yeah, it's a collaborative effort, but there's some people who feel that more otters should be harvested, and there's some people who don't think any should be harvested. So, trying to find a balance somewhere is going to be difficult, but it's a process. It's going to take quite a while, and I don't expect anything to happen in the next 6 months to a year. But it's just part of the process. Keep moving things forward. So I hope I answered your questions. Yeah.
Any other input on the Sea Otter Working Group discussion? Seeing none, that brings us to assembly member comments. Are there any assembly members that have comments today? Member Lynn?
Yeah, I want to regress back a little bit to talk about our charter in the hospital. And the hospital, in the charter, the hospital board has pretty much autonomy to run both operations and the facility. And I think that in the future, we've got to, and in 2018, I think, I don't remember the exact meeting, but in 2018, the assembly stated that actually in one of the meetings, it's in the minutes, that they supported the hospital board in it and being autonomous and being in its operations. And I think we need to go back and make sure that we recognize that hospital board and that we recognize that autonomy. I do think we need to have a discussion with the hospital board in terms of what particular items we want to be, we'd like to be partners with in terms of making decisions. And obviously the facility and that type of thing is one of them. Operations, I don't think we'd really want to, but I think there are parts of that we really like to be partners with them on. And I think that discussion needs to take place with the board. Thank you.
Any other member Mutri?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On I guess the meeting of May 14th, 2018, I think, where Member Lynn was talking about, I had it as an agenda item under assembly discussion items to, the idea was to invite the search senior executive Dan Newmeister to come to the Borough Assembly and kind of give a presentation. And I happened to be out of town on a dive survey, but there was a recording, there's a recording of the minutes, and it lasts about 4 minutes, and it's Member Strand and Castro and Jay Stanton Grigger and the mayor and Member Morol. And, there was quite a conversation about how we operate. And while I wasn't there, I was chastised several times by the folks on the assembly here about, that's not our role. Several people said that it's up to the hospital board and staff to go through the process of deciding what they want and if they need help from the borough. Several people said it's the hospital and staff's business to run the hospital, and it's the assembly's role to run the business of the borough. And I guess it gets back to the minutes of that meeting, and it says, all members present agreed during the discussion that the hospital board and the community, not the assembly, were responsible for deciding whether or not search would be involved in the Petersburg Medical Center. 2 weeks ago, we passed a resolution, supporting the hospital in their endeavors to build a new hospital. And I think it just it gives the impression, and we talked about this at this meeting where we passed our resolution, that, we needed to, whether or not it was a 6-1 vote or a 7-0 vote, we need to be supportive of the hospital and work with the hospital board to make sure we're moving in the right direction. I think the hospital board and the hospital CEO are doing a good job of keeping us informed. If I want to invite somebody to the borough assembly to make a presentation, I'm going to have it on as an agenda item so that we can talk about it and we can sort out whether or not it's something that we want to deal with, or if we don't want to deal with it, like we decided on May of 2018, that we need to be honest with the hospital board. This is great that Dr. Brule was here giving us the presentation, but it's a little disingenuous to him to come here and talk to the assembly when the assembly is just doing more or less the bidding of what the hospital wants. If they need support from us, whether it's lobbying or talking to folks who might have funding, that's what we're here for. I think we're not doing the community any service, any good service when we tell somebody like Mr. Brule or Dr. Brule, to come here and give us a presentation, because we're not going to do anything about it. We are going to move any kind of recommendation to the hospital board, and they're going to decide one way or the other. So, I would encourage, like we did in 2018, to throw something on the agenda, let the assembly decide if they want to invite somebody and move forward. We can certainly do whatever individuals wants, but it doesn't really do well for the community to kind of have these discussions at the assembly level when they really should be going on at the hospital and the hospital board. As far as I'm concerned, Dr. Brule should have given his presentation to the hospital board. I'm sure we all have a lot of questions after that presentation, but I don't think it's the time right now to ask those questions of him, because that's kind of, as Member Lynn said, the hospital board's very autonomous, and I didn't always believe that, but I do now. And I'm for doing it the way we did with this resolution here moving forward. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Any other assembly members have comments today? Okay, that brings us to recognitions. Many recognitions today. I would like to recognize the people that did all the work, like the manager mentioned in his report. Desi Burrell sent out an email today, how many hours the people had worked over the weekend. They were working 12-hour days. And so without seeing the email, I don't want to mention their names, but her husband was one of them and some of their friends. So appreciate that. I looked at the playground today from the distance. It looks like it'd be fun, but I don't think I could climb up that. So, any other recognitions? Remember Laura?
Just one. It was, I know I've joked with you several times about wanting to go back to your regular job, but it does in fact seem that you are free, sir.
Almost, but thank you very much to the assembly. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a special shout out to Aiden Lohr for his state championship events, the high jump and the 100-meter dash. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I think we should be proud of him. And if you see him, give him a pat on the back because it doesn't happen often around here. So thank you very much and congratulations.
Member Trimley, do you have your hand up?
Thank you. Yeah, just a few quick ones. First, thanks to the Assembly for the special meeting on June 1st. Unfortunately, it coincided with the almost exact time of my grandpa's interment. So thank you for your swift action. Thank you to the EOC and PMC for all your service in this last year and a half. To the larger community, everyone that got vaccinated is protecting your neighbors by doing that, and you have enabled us to get to this stage as a larger community. So to each and every person who got us to that point, however big or small, give yourselves a pat on the back, and I hope you get to enjoy your summer.
All right, any other recognitions by assembly members or staff? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.